The second I'm away, I'll hit the remote and blow the coronet to bits.
I will not allow that.
What will you do? If you shoot me, you prove yourself a hypocrite to every pacifist ideal you hold dear.
So what you're saying is that there are absolutely no negative consequences for shooting you. Why are you not gunning him down like Bambi's mom? It's very rare that a single scene of a show gives you so much to talk about, but I suppose that goes to the Clone Wars credit. The Clone Wars was a massively underrated series straining under the restrictions of the films it was caught between. You see, Star Wars has always fit into one of two categories when it comes to overarching themes. The first is good triumphs over evil, space under the tyranny of Nazis, and we can massacre the Nazis without consequence because Nazis are dicks. This is where the original trilogy, Knights of the Old Republic, The Force Awakens, and Star Wars Rebels falls into. The second category is that things are a lot more messy and complicated, everyone's pushing for their own gain, and we're stuck in this galactic game of political intrigue and corruption that demands that you think really hard about what's going on and who to trust. That would be the prequel trilogy, Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Old Republic MMO, and the Clone Wars. Clone Wars was stuck in the task of making a very politically murky war interesting to actually take part in rather than just view from the sidelines, and it succeeded in telling a very smart and very thoughtful story. Except for this scene. This scene is just wrong and stupid and wrong. And here's how. The problem with this scene is that Tal Merrick flat out admits to the Duchess Satine that there are no negative consequences for killing him.
What will you do? If you shoot me, you prove yourself a hypocrite to every pacifist ideal you hold dear.
This is a rather difficult concept for the internet to grasp, but contextless hypocrisy is at the very bottom on the list of sins, especially if said hypocrisy leads to a positive outcome. Tal Merrick's plan only works if everyone around him holds the idiot ball and assumes that killing a terrorist while self-identifying as a pacifist is worse than being said terrorist in the first place. And the only people who would believe such a thing are, well, idiots. Having to make the decision to kill in spite of being a self-proclaimed pacifist is the most basic requirement of any kind of political leader. It's why nations who hold nuclear weapons have what's called a second strike policy. It states, we won't instigate a nuclear attack, but if you bomb us, we will bomb you back. Having a first strike policy is a terrible idea, but so is having a never launch the missile policy. Any world leader who hesitates on defending their people while they're under attack, real under attack, not what the Americans think is under attack, is a leader that should be immediately removed from office. This is the Duchess Satine's conundrum. She wants to be sure her planet stays uninvolved in the Clone Wars, and that's fine so long as the war is only happening around her. But in this episode, the war is brought to her planet, and now she has to make hard choices. Now, it is totally possible to remain uninvolved in the Clone Wars while simultaneously kicking the separatist-backed terrorists off your planet, but that option doesn't seem to occur to anyone. Presumably, again, out of fear of being branded a hypocrite by enforcing her own non-involvement policy. This comes around to the final confrontation with Tal Merrick, where Satine and Kenobi are visibly struggling with the decision to kill Tal Merrick out of fear of marking themselves hypocrites. But isn't it wrong to be a hypocrite? Well, that depends on the context, Billy. If you betray your ideals in the short term to ensure they remain upheld in the long term, then it wasn't wrong. It was the smart choice. If you only turn aggressive when people have become aggressive with you, then no genuine hypocrisy has taken place. This is one of those nuanced situations I talk about so much that the internet as a whole finds themselves incapable of grappling with. By the internet's logic, and the logic the episode is running on, the right thing to do would have been to let Tal Merrick get away and continue to wreak havoc. But the sheer damage that Tal Merrick could inflict if he was allowed to get away is too critical to allow him to get away in the first place, which is why somebody does something about it.
Come on then. Who will strike first and brand themselves a cold-blooded killer?
Oh, fuck you, episode. What? What's wrong? Do you not see what they've done? It's very obvious that the writers want you to see Anakin killing Tal Merrick as the wrong decision, because they very unsubtly overlaid a few chords of the Imperial March over Anakin standing up to say, ooh, Anakin's taking another step down his dark path. Because we already know that Anakin becomes Space Hitler at the end of the Clone Wars, the writers have free reign to make Anakin do whatever the plot requires to be done, but that the writers can easily walk back on with, well, duh, Anakin becomes a Sith Lord, of course he does this stuff. off. This often works to the Clone Wars' benefit because they have a character who isn't locked down by the pathetic Jedi moralizing and inaction that is usually responsible for things going wrong in Star Wars. But it also means that the writers don't have to stick to any of it. So in the Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker is quick to anger and quick to violence. This is a far cry from the movies, where Anakin is an anti-violence and thereby much more violent apologist. When the Jedi are about to kill Palpatine before he could become all-powerful, he stops them because violence would be wrong. Oh look, a fascist empire rises. Oops. If anything, the Clone Wars portrayal of Anakin is so different from the Anakin of the films that all the allusions toward his fall to Darth Vader ring hollow, because if this Anakin were in the films, the Empire wouldn't have risen. But that's a double-edged sword. Because Anakin isn't restricted by Jedi dogma on the basis of, he gonna be a Sith, bro, he ends up making some of the smartest decisions in the series, but the writers are under the impression that you will see this as a bad thing because he gonna be a Sith, bro. So when they make the conscious decision to allude to his fall to the dark side, the conclusion I come to is, are you on crack? No, writers, you turn that music off. This was the good decision, highlighted by Anakin's own dialogue.
Anakin. What? He was gonna blow up the ship.
It's not the Jedi way. He must live.
Anakin's fall to the very unsubtly fascist empire didn't rise from his eager willingness to kill terrorists, it came from his stubborn unwillingness to kill terrorists. He later goes on a killing spree of the Jedi after having the false belief put into his head that they're the real fascists, who does that remind you of, and is played like a fool from the start of the movie to the end, just like in real life. That's the sort of attitude that leads Anakin's fall to the dark side, an overwhelming self-interest to protect the few people he cares about to the detriment of everybody else, the desire to seek protection from poverty, attraction to power, and dogmatic ideals. Cutting down somebody who will literally kill thousands of people with the push of a button is the exact opposite of that, and it is a massive writing blunder that stains the Clone Wars reputation, partly by completely failing to understand the movies it was taking all its material from.
Anakin. What? He was gonna blow up the ship.
Yeah, Obi-Wan, shut up. Clone Wars writers aren't the first people who mistakenly think the prequel trilogy needs fixing, and they're probably not going to be the last. In fact, note to self, schedule several glass of water videos on elements from the prequel trilogy because they're actually really good movies with some of the best performances I've seen in science fiction. I mean, the original trilogy carries all the same failings and flaws, but they get by on rose-tinted goggles like a lot of vanilla World of Warcraft does. I mean, how do people forget that Harrison Ford shat on the script directly to George Lucas's face? That's the most noteworthy bit of trivia right after Alec Guinness hating every single moment of being in those movies. I mean, seriously, if I had a nickel for every time some OT baby boomer had a meltdown because Jar Jar simply exists, I wouldn't have to do this show anymore.
So you will do nothing? Apathy is death, worse than death, because at least a rotting corpse feeds the beasts and insects.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death. Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Statement. Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.